Please be seated. So I wonder if you've had a moment like one Mary's having in the gospel this morning.
Breath of God.
Okay, I know. It probably didn't happen the same way. But I wonder if you ever had a moment in which the whole of your reality went all topsy-turvy and upside down and around in the blink of an eye. Seems to me Mary is in one of those kinds of moments. And like us, she absolutely understood that things were changing rapidly in this conversation with Gabriel. And of course, while it is surprising news that Mary receives in the gospel lesson, I wonder if maybe a stronger focus for us is not whether or not Mary knew, but rather on how Mary accepts the news being gifted to her. Perhaps our focus should rest on how Mary encounters Gabriel and is able and willing to say yes to this perplexing greeting and surprising news. The moment shared between Mary and Gabriel is a moment in which the ordinary path life is following is altered. Perhaps it's a sharp right or a sudden left into a new road, or maybe it's more like a sharp bend that is leading to a new and unexpected future. Or maybe it's more like a T-junction, and now all of a sudden one has to decide, do I go right or left? The moment Gabriel appears to Mary shifts her reality in pretty big ways. After all, Mary is a young woman in the 1st century who's engaged to be married. The announcement of a baby at this stage would normally leave her destitute and outcast. She would have been rejected and shunned by her community. Without belonging to a family or to a household, she'd be left with no reliable means for providing for herself or for her new baby. Thankfully for Mary, things do not turn out the way they normally would. And many of us are probably thinking in the back of our brains about how Joseph is encouraged in a dream to continue the engagement. But I would also point out that that is only part of the story in Matthew's telling of the birth of Jesus. In Luke's version, the emphasis is all on Mary.
Oh, nice.
Joseph is mentioned in passing. There's no dream sequence in the gospel. Instead, it's the quiet acceptance of God's invitation by Mary.
Maybe that's his breath.
She is the one that's able to say yes to what God's doing in her life.
That's probably what it is.
And it's also Joseph who echoes her yes as they go to be registered in Bethlehem for the census. In the course of life, we too might have the moment in which we're gifted a messenger from God who shifts the normal pattern that life is following until that moment. Now, I know it's unlikely that the messenger appears with bright white wings and a golden halo wearing a toga. Instead, it's more likely that messenger is looking quite ordinary. Maybe looking a little bit more along the lines of Cary Grant in the classic film The Bishop's Wife than bright wings and majestic appearances. The news brought by the messengers in our lives will have a way of upending things, and it's likely that it will feel quite unsettling to us as life suddenly shifts. It's likely we'll experience the news as a moment in which our entire world is flipping around and doing somersaults as we grapple with the news being shared. The question before us is the same as the one that was before Mary. Can we stay in the moment long enough to ponder the meaning of what is happening? Will we have the ability to utter a simple yes to the invitation being shared? There's a strong temptation for us to look at the contours of the COVID-19 pandemic as a moment in which life has been upended. And of course, that's true. Life has been upended. And I think we will eventually be able to look back over that time to discover moments in which God's been present to us, inviting us forward. And inviting us forward in ways that we would not have considered prior to this rather radical shift. However, I'm also aware of the pain that has come in the wake of this pandemic and that we are likely to continue to experience. For all, we've all known someone who's come down with COVID-19. Many of us have lost beloved friends and family members because of that same virus. Seems to me that there's too much pain within the pandemic for us to consider it a holy moment within our lives, a moment of good news. Instead of considering the pandemic as some kind of holy messenger, which in and of itself invites all kinds of really bad theology, I wonder if we're able instead to look over the contours of our lives, to discern where God has been active. I wonder if it is possible to identify a moment or two in which a messenger brought surprising and stunning news to you. What has been the moment in which you found yourself receiving the good news of God's love? A moment in which that love is made profoundly real to you. And who was it that helped you see how God was in the midst of that good news? The people in those moments might be our own form of a Gabriel, a divine messenger who is creating a holy interruption that shifts the course of life. Biblical scholar Courtney Buggs offers the question, it's not so much why Mary, as much as it is why not Mary. And perhaps by extension, we might also ponder, why not us? And in keeping with the way that Gabriel appears to a woman who is of little importance in the first century world, we might also want to wonder about how God is showing up through divine messengers to the poor, the downtrodden, the hungry, the sick, the lonely, and those on the margins, perhaps a little more frequently. On the last Sunday of Advent, we received the foretelling of the coming of Christ. Mary's told that God is with her, and she's given a surprising invitation to which she is able to say, "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." Today, we, like Mary, are feeling societal shifts. And not only because of the pandemic, and God is with us. We're being asked to pay more attention to voices who've long been ignored. And we are beginning to hear the invitation to notice those on the margins. And God is with us. We're struggling to keep up with how much we have to shift our habits of living. And in this moment, God is with us. Life has changed, life will continue to change. And in the midst of all of it, God is with us.